Hey, welcome to another episode of the 40 Athletes Live podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Holzer, along with my good buddy, Jimmy Huber. Jimmy, what's going on today, man?
Hey, excited to be with you on a beautiful, again, feel like it's spring weather, 60-something degrees or almost 70 in Kansas City yesterday.
Man.
Looking forward to it. Spring's a-coming.
Hey, I'm just glad the sun's out, quite frankly. I felt like there was like 2 weeks of just snow and cold weather. But man, I'm excited today because we have somebody pretty unique to our platform that we haven't really dove into. She's a former gymnast, a gymnastics coach, experienced strategist. And, have you ever heard of Cirque du Soleil, by the way?
I have not.
You never heard of Cirque du Soleil?
No, I mean, my wife tells me I need to get more broad in my horizons. She says I'm not very cultured, so maybe you can help me.
Hey, our guest can help you. I don't know how much I can per se, but for sure. She ran the VP of the experience team for Cirque du Soleil, so making sure people had a great experience. And she led people from, I think she said, like 41 different countries, or maybe she's been to 41 different countries. Either way, she has a broad perspective on what different things, different leadership styles look like across the world. So,
by the way, I don't even think you've been to 41 states. And when you said experience strategist, I'm like, what the heck is that?
I know.
Come on, bring it on. Let's find out.
I have not been to 41 states. That is also true. So without further ado, we're going to bring on Carolene Méli. Caroline, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And you are in Montenegro, is that correct?
I'm in Montenegro, which is in Europe on the Mediterranean. And I travel a lot, so I'm here temporarily.
Okay.
That's where I'm at now.
On the Mediterranean, that's pretty. I've been to Europe, but I've not been to the Mediterranean. So that's really neat that you're there. And
hey, Jason, talking about Mediterranean, you ought to do your Zeus and Hercules type deal because you did video on that. The gods of Mediterranean, Greece, and that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
How's that Zeus? Right, right, Jason?
Yes, exactly, absolutely. Well, hey, Caroline, you have a bunch of different. A bunch of experience in leadership, different styles, especially working with Cirque du Soleil. So, what does experience mean to you? What is as an experienced strategist? What are we trying to create with our experiences?
Yeah, you stolen my question on my interview show. It's the one question that I ask all of my guests: what elements make up an incredible experience? And for me, it really starts with how we feel when we're going through something, when we're going through an experience, right? And for those of us that are creating experiences for other people, the very first question we should be asking is, how do we want our guests, our audience, our listeners, our customers to feel, our teammates to feel once they've finished with us? And I think if you can get really clear on that question and the answer, then it will help kind of navigate. So that's the very first thing for me. It really comes down to how I feel. And as you mentioned, I've been to 41 countries. I've traveled to 41 countries and it's been very interesting to experience so many amazing things and with different people and in different cultures and with different languages. And it all comes down to that feeling, like how something feels in the moment. So that leads everything when it comes to experience. And, James, you're not the only one that doesn't know what an experienced strategist is. I totally made that up because I was like, I need to coin a term that best kind of describes what I do. And that's what I came up with. So I really help businesses, individuals really create more impact in the experiences they offer. So a lot of times I work with businesses. So I'm really focused on the experiences that they offer their employees and their clients and their customers. But sometimes I'm working for individuals that just want to create something, maybe create a retreat or create an event. And so it shows up in many different ways, but that's kind of the base.
So let's break that down because I think I want to dive into as a coach, because I think as coaches, we're providing experience for our athletes, right? Student athletes. And you hear a lot of times where you never want to be the last coach for somebody, right? They quit playing because of you.
Yes.
So as a coach, what are things I can do to think about and create maybe experiences that an athlete would be excited to be there or at the practice, want to come back for more? What are things I should be thinking about?
Yeah, so when you were speaking, then the first thing that came to mind was, so like Jason, you mentioned, I did coach gymnastics for many, many years, but I did a stint of coaching gymnastics in France. And I can speak French, my father's French, but I'm not 100% fluent. And I learned through coaching gymnastics in France that there's a hell of a lot of words that I do not know. And they're all words to do with the human body, like squeeze your muscles, like straighten your leg, all these like action words that I'd never used in my experience. So I had to learn to communicate with these little kids. They were like 7, 8, in a way that was not language based. And that was very challenging, even as a coach, because depending on the sport, a lot of times when you're coaching, you're showing the movement or you're giving some kind of demonstration yourself or with, a guinea pig next to you. But when you remove language from the equation, it's a completely different world. And I really struggled. But at the same time, I really asked myself that same question as well, is, okay, how can I give these girls standing in front of me an incredible experience tonight for this 1 hour, for these 2 hours, without being able to communicate properly? And again, it came down to what I mentioned before, and it's how do I want them to feel when they go home to their parents after this? How do I want them to talk about this class when they go to school tomorrow? And obviously, in this particular example, I was working with really young kids, like 7, 8. But when I was coaching gymnastics in Australia, when I grew up in Australia, a lot of times I was working with teenagers. So I was able to have different conversations. And in that instance, I was really thinking, I want to have an impact on these guys. So I need to know what is important to them. I need to know what their goals are, because I may be pushing them down a direction that potentially they don't want to go down or they don't care about, or maybe it is something they deem as important, but it's only because we've told them so. It's not because they feel it. So that's kind of where, depending on the age group, I think, in terms of how deep you can connect with that purpose and that motivation. But I think that is the key. And then how can you communicate them without using language? A lot of times it's an interesting concept to think about.
Caroline, my first teaching job, I taught at a school that was predominantly Hispanic kids that spoke mostly Spanish, right? So like you mentioned, I had to create a physical education class experience, and most of them didn't speak the same language as me, So if you were to be a mentor of mine, how would you, knowing that you were in a similar situation, what did you do to create a great experience, even though you spoke it, maybe didn't speak the same language as them, and you had to use something else besides your words? How did you create that?
Yeah, so for me, it came down to connection. I wanted to be able to connect with them on a level that didn't include language. So, I was very cautious and very attentive to how I showed up, basically, from an energy point of view. In France, these were very little kids, 7, 8-year-olds. So, it was all about energy and smiling and being that kind leader, and really kind of making things quite fun without even using words. And also at the same time, kind of making a bit of an idiot of myself at times, trying to form a connection with them that they were going to respond to. And that worked incredibly well for me. I mean, I didn't think about it too much at the beginning. That was just my default, like, I don't know any of the words that I need to use. So I'm just going to kind of like smile and laugh. And then, of course, when you're talking about from a coaching point of view, there's a lot of coaching you can do through actions, right? A lot of the things I had to show myself. And it, sometimes I'd wake up the next day like so sore because I hadn't used those muscles like since I was a gymnast all these years ago. But yeah, I think it's about, if you cannot communicate verbally, it's about the energy, because everybody feels energy, no matter what is the barrier between you two, you're going to show up for each other in a way that can actually go a lot further, a lot deeper than words.
I like that when you said like your enthusiasm, your energy, smiling, right? Because again, they pick up on that and they almost reflect what it is that you're projecting. And you said something to me and you said fun, have fun. And I know me as a coach over here is like, now you're going to be tough. You're going to execute. You're going to do these toughness drills. You're going to figure this out. And so we're not having fun. But I do believe more that I've studied and understood and reflect as a coach, it is you want your kids to enjoy the experience. So what are maybe like some fun activities in general maybe a coach could do And even I hear a lot of times when you're wrapping up a practice, do something fun or an event that they want to come back, that they feel good about leaving, right? That they have good energy when they're leaving. So there are fun activities that you would suggest that coaches can do?
I always found the alternate. I always found that leading with something really fun was how I was going to kind of get them engaged, right? Yeah, you can finish, of course, how you finish your class is incredibly important because like you said, James, you want them to come back the next day. However, I feel like those first 5 minutes, those first 10 minutes are really key. And that almost will by default drive them back, right? And so again, going back to the energy, I wanted to always do something in the warm-up that was really high energy. So, you know, when you're a coach, you look at gamifying everything basically. And so it was in gymnastics, it was all of these little kind of relay races or, you know, I mean, later on it was kind of the floor is lava and you have to use boxes and mats and beams and all this kind of equipment to get from one side of the room to the other. You know, sometimes I had no space at all. I had like a little strip of mat because there was so many other people kind of in the gym. So my focus was always like, okay, I want to go out with a bang, let's say, and I want to create that energy and create that connection with them, because then we're going to go through the class as a team. We're not going to go through the class as me being very authoritative. And of course, there's that element that comes into coaching as well. But I found that if I focused on those first 10 minutes and almost set the stage, the rest of the class had this natural fluidity. And by the end, they kind of didn't want to end, or they wanted to, you know, keep going or try something else. And so, yeah, that's what I would say. The beginning sometimes can create more of an impact than the end.
And the other thing too is like music. I know, you know, back in the day when I was playing, of course, it was like there was no distractions, no music, nothing like that. But anymore, you see a lot of coaches play music before practice, like when practice, you know, warm ups. Maybe it's in between something because music gets that rhythm and gets people in the groove. Are there things that you add to maybe the experiences like music and things like that stimulate kind of certain emotions, get people engaged and wanting to, you know, give their best and be at that practice or that event?
Yeah, so for me in particular in gymnastics, like usually when you're warming up, there's other groups in the gym. So you don't necessarily have that much say over music is the perfect example over music, because then it's something that would project to the whole entire gym, you know, and I didn't have there was other people that were training and working out. But props was the biggest thing, you know. In a gymnastics hall, you have endless supply of cool, fun props and things that you can make really, really creative. So I always tried to create some activities and create like a really fun vibe straight away through using props in a different way than we would use in normal training session. You know, like you may have a box that you want to do that usually you would use for like box jumps, let's say, for example, you know, and I tried to think of, okay, how can I use this box, but in a different way? That's a bit crazy. Like that's a bit weird, you know? And I remember one, I don't know if you guys have ever done this before, but one that I used to love is it was like a partner work. It was like you did it with a partner. And I said, okay, between the two of you, you need to have the following touching the ground, like 1 foot, 1 hand, and 1 elbow. And that's it. And so they had to, especially with young kids, it's hard because, you know, they have to think about them and their teammate. Yeah. And then, of course, you can make it really easy at the beginning, like 2 hands, 2 feet, and then they do the kind of wheelbarrow setup or like a handstand. But you can get really, really tricky and go like 1 foot, 1 elbow. And it's such a fun activity to start because you can make it super, super hard. And then everyone just falls over and they're laughing. And that's one that I'll never forget because it always worked. Or even if my class was like causing a bit of trouble and I wasn't able to grab that attention, it was always like my default, fun activity to go to because I knew it was really impactful.
I think like you said, though, it's in gymnastics or sports in general, you're so like it's a grind. You know, you're drilling stuff and you're constantly doing repetitions. Don't you think for coaches using your imagination to make games of stuff? When I find out I make a game of something, whether it's a drill in basketball or the kids get more engaged because it becomes competitive for them. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, and what I would add to that as well is if they can come up with the idea or they can come up with the rules or the game, their engagement will, I don't know, double, triple, quadruple, because now they really want it to succeed. They want everyone to have fun because it's their idea, right? So sometimes I would almost use that as a bit of a cop-out, like, crap, I can't think of anything to do today. And I'm like, right, guys, today you're going to split up into 2 teams and you have to create, I'd give a challenge, like who can create the best like relay team, or who can create, and because they are using their creativity, they're using their communication, right? They have to communicate with each other. They're trying to work it out as a team, like problem solving. And then they're using like analytical skills, because it's like, well, how do we judge this, or how do we make it happen? And then you just create this vibe, kind of just happens in front of you, and you're kind of just standing there like, this was the best idea ever, but it didn't even, I have no involvement in it whatsoever. So yeah, that's sometimes like a really good idea if you just don't have the energy, or you can't think of what to do, like get them to create it. Half the time they're going to love doing that.
Now, watching you on some of your videos, I've seen you in the Mediterranean, I see you in areas, and you got the video, the music, and you're a poet. I mean, you're a poet. I don't know if you know it, but I mean, listening to you, I don't know who's written some of this, but a question I have for you as a coach, I get so focused in, like, we're on a basketball court, we're in this area, this is where I train, this is where we do things. Say, for example, that I wanted to create an experience outside of it. We're traveling to a tournament or something, and we're playing, but we're in an area we've never been in, and we can maybe experience this place that we've never been to. What are things me as a coach I can think of to make it a great experience for my team, to broaden the horizons, to build maybe better chemistry and have them really enjoy the time?
Yeah, you're speaking to a full-time traveler here, right? So I can talk about it all day long. But I will say, before even thinking about activities, this is a conversation that I have a lot in kind of with businesses who have teams. And in my experience, when I am trying to think of a new idea, when I need to implement a new strategy, I think oftentimes we underestimate the power of our, in this case, our students or our athletes, in my case, the employees. And oftentimes their insights, their ideas, and what they have to say is so incredibly valuable. But us as leaders, sometimes we forget that, because we're the leader. We have to show up as the leader. We're the one with the expertise. We're the one with the 20, 30 years experience. And so it is up to us to kind of devise everything. But sometimes if we just ask some questions to our teams, our employees, our athletes, you can get the most incredible insights that can actually create some strategies and ideas for you. So like in this example that we're talking about, the first thing I would be doing is asking them, because I might spend so much time devising this crazy plan that I really want to do, or that I think is going to be amazing, and they're going to hate it. And this happened to me so many times, because when I was working for Cirque du Soleil, as you mentioned, I was running different experiences for the guests, the spectators, mainly in the VIP. But there was a few times where I would create the most incredible incentive program. It was amazing. I was so proud of myself. I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever created. And the staff really responded. And then the way it works with us at Cirque du Soleil is we had local staff. So we would change cities or countries every 2 months, right? And so one time I had this example where I created this incentive program to help with the sales. It went amazingly well. And then we got to the next city, which was a new country. And I rolled it out like, guys, this is amazing. You're going to love it. And they hated it. They hated it. They didn't do it. They were like, we want no part in this. And I was like, what? I didn't know what to do. I was really shocked. And that was really my first lesson in something that you implement with one group of people may not necessarily work with another. And it is up to you to ask those quality questions and to ask those questions so that you can really see what is important for them, like what matters to them and what excites them, right? And so in this example, I would start, before I even come up with any ideas myself, I'd be asking them, like, how did they want to spend that extra time, because maybe they want to do something more around like team building and like bonding and learning something, maybe even about leadership. maybe they want to have no part in that, and they want to see something very specific in the city that you didn't think about because, you know, they're Gen Z or they're even younger than that, and it didn't even come on your radar. So asking them would be the first step for me.
Yeah, and Caroline, you mentioned, you know, leadership and how maybe that's a little bit different than what leadership used to be. And you mentioned asking questions. Are there like 2 or 3 questions that are somewhat universal that you can ask different groups of people that maybe you can get insights from, where you're not always trying to come up with different questions for each group? But is there like, you know, 1, 2, maybe 3 that you can get insights from to help you kind of understand the group that you're working with? Because you mentioned like you were going to different countries every couple of months.
Yeah.
And their culture, what they enjoy is completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, I think from a motivation point of view, is that what you're asking, to kind of get?
Yeah, like, you know, like whenever you mentioned like, hey, one group loved it, the other group hated it. Well, like, you know, did you come up with some questions that you found like, oh, I could ask these questions to any group to get some great insight on, you know, what experiences that they would enjoy or that they would be involved with?
Yeah, I always started with learning about them, and that was hard, you know, in a service-based industry. It was not that easy because it was fast-paced. We only had a small amount of time together, but I found very quickly that the motivation with my groups differed greatly. So for example, in one city that I was in, who everybody knew about Cirque du Soleil. Cirque du Soleil was huge in that place. It was an honor to work for Cirque du Soleil. People, and it was a young group of students, and they couldn't wait to put that on their CV, you know. That group of people, I asked them a lot different questions than a group of people where my staff who were maybe in their 30s or 40s, it was like their third job, you know, and their motivation really was financial. They didn't really care about Cirque du Soleil. They cared about their paycheck. And so really understanding that very, very quickly was how I was able to get kind of an insight into their motivation, and then tailor what I was doing to motivate them, to get them inspired, to get them working really well. So that would be my first step, is just getting a glimpse in some, especially kids and students, they're not going to tell you a lot, but trying to get an idea about like, why are they here? Like, why do they love basketball? Why does someone love gymnastics, you know? Because that's always like the starting point. Then you can go from there, because there's probably a lot of commonalities in the team, right? You know, like if everyone there is in a basketball team, there's a good chance that they all have a very similar motivation, that the people they look up to, their role models, they're probably similar, and there's probably a lot of repeat. So you can really use that to then start making some changes or some great experiences for them.
So I hear what you're saying is like, start with the why, right? That'll tell you a lie. Just start like, hey, figure out why they're there in the first place. So that's a good point. And so how have you used that like with your leadership strategies that you do currently? Like, what do you do like with now that you're past Cirque du Soleil? How have you used that to develop your leadership, you know, curriculums, your teachings, your instructions with people that, you know, that come and seek you out for advice?
Yeah, so I have a leadership program. It's called Better Your Leadership, and it's very much targeted towards new managers that are just starting off. It's the first time they've been in a leadership position. That's kind of my target group. And one of the areas that I focus on, one of the lessons, is teaching life skills, not tasks, right? And I think oftentimes as coaches, leaders, we focus a lot on the tasks. You know, if you're in a work environment, let's say you're working in a restaurant or something like that, there's so many tasks. It's all operational. If you're a coach, you may be highly focused on, you know, an upcoming competition or, you know, some kind of training camp, or that they need to, in gymnastics, like we have certain skills that we needed to meet so that they could pass the next level. So all of your focus was there. But what I found was that once I started incorporating this idea of life skills, like teaching that little bit extra that goes beyond the skill itself and really connects with why are we learning this, and then how can we use this for more than gymnastics, you know? Whenever I'm coaching someone and training with them, I'm always saying to myself, okay, I want to teach them something that will be beneficial and useful in the next thing they do, and then the next thing they do after that, you know. That comes down to really looking at what are the skills that we can teach that are beyond that the repetitions or the drills or the specific skills, like in gymnastics, if we would take all the competitions. So yeah, that's a bit of a strategy that I coined, and it works really well for me. It's like thinking a little bit beyond what's really in front of you right now, because their goal might be, if we take gymnastics, for example, like their goal might be, I want to be able to hold a handstand for 10 minutes. Okay, but like what am I teaching them physically in those skills that they can actually use after that, you know? Mm-hmm. Body awareness, self-awareness, you know, teaching them about failure and how to actually be motivated once you just cannot hold a handstand longer than 10 seconds ever, you know? So that's what I try to think about. And that's really what I think my legacy is, and what I really try to impress on the people that I work with is kind of going beyond that immediate, what do we need to achieve here right now?
So how do, you know, in sports in general, you hear it a lot about culture, building culture, right? To have success. So when you're mentoring, say, a leader, and say as a coach or somebody to run a sports organization, you have people of different belief systems and different experiences, come from different ethnic backgrounds. What are some of the strategies suggest you give them, things they can do to really build a culture where everybody's focused on the same mission and they're buying into it and kind of rowing the boat, going the same direction? What are things that coaches, administrators can do to get people to buy in and move in that direction?
You know, I love talking about culture, and I'm always reading books around company culture and just culture in general, tribal culture. You know, I'm a traveler, so I love learning about different tribal cultures. And what I have found, and what I've also read a lot on, is you can talk about culture all day long, all day, all night. But the key to actually building culture is not talking about it, it's experiencing it, right? So if I'm standing there in front of my team and I'm going, okay, you know, the culture of this training facility or this club or this school is all these things. Because it's incredibly vague, especially when you're speaking to younger people, students, young kids, it's very vague when you talk about, you know, the mission statement, the vision, you know, what are we really trying to achieve here as a club? And so when you're speaking about that, it's very hard to be connected with that until you actually experience it. And we all know that as coaches. We all know you can try and you can teach someone through words the same thing again and again and again. But until they actually get it, that first time, they don't connect with it, right? Especially when we're talking about sports, because it's all about, you know, your body and connecting that awareness with your body. Okay, if I straighten my legs, then it'd be more beneficial to me and I'll be able to land the skill, let's say, for example. But until I experience it, I'm not going to be able to connect all the dots. So I think as coaches and as leaders, it's not easy. Like, I'm not saying it's an easy task, but I think we have to kind of steer away from these are the values, these are what we're trying to achieve as a team. I want this for the team, and trying to get to that same result of what you're trying to achieve kind of theoretically, but through experience. So how can they experience, you know, if one of your vision is really around supporting each other and being a really strong team together, instead of telling them that, how can you create some kind of maybe accountability or fun activities or exercises so that they can experience that themselves? Because then they are going to be like, oh, got it. Okay, now I can see why supporting each other and showing up for each other and cheering each other on is actually really important.
So, like, for example, when you have people, you know, you see it all the time, like acronym, like team. Okay, and you have tenacity, like attitude, right? Motivation, whatever it might be. So what you're saying is, if you have these maybe words that are going to be kind of a cornerstone of our program, don't just talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's do things to experience what tenacity is. Maybe take them through some challenges, working together to overcome it. Or, hey, attitude, positive attitude, negative attitude. You're going through negative experience, whatever. Okay, how do we shift to get the positive attitude? Here's what it looks like. So experiencing those things, so that not only they're doing it, they're feeling it, and this is what it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, standing in front of someone and saying, I need you to be more tenacious. Like no adult would even be able to kind of decipher that in their own language, right? Sounds great in theory, but what does that mean? Like what on earth does that even mean? You know, the only way that you're going to be able to get that end goal, if you want someone to be more, if you want tenacity to be like one of the key pillars of your team, they have to experience it, and they have to understand what being tenacious means and what happens when you're not tenacious, like when you're kind of on the other end. Because once everyone has a different perspective, and we don't experience events by just looking at them, right? We attach meaning to events, right? We attach a meaning, things going on. So you can talk about it all day long, but until someone attaches some meaning to that message personally through their own personal perspective and experience, you're not going to be able to shift anything. So I think, yeah, exactly. Like you can have the most incredibly impressive acronym or, you know, vision statement that is like on a poster on above the basketball court. But I think until you actually have some practical applications with your team, you're not going to see much leeway. It would just be words. It's like when we sing a national anthem, like we're just singing the words really, unless you have some deep connection to that anthem for whatever reason through your own experience and reality. Most of us, I mean, I don't know if you guys are the same, but in my opinion, when I sing the Australian national anthem, which is the only one I really know, I'm just singing the words. Like, yeah, I feel proud and yeah, I feel great, but I'm not connecting with the words per se.
Hey, good. And this thing too in coaching, I think, like if you have like tenacity, let's go into that as one of the words, and say you lose a game, instead of coming in and yelling at them, you're bums, you stink, you're not, you know, like degrading them and like it's end of the world. It's like, okay, like we talk about, it's winning and learning, coming in. Okay, what can we learn from this? How can we get better? Okay, we got to get back to practice. We got to get better in these areas. We got to stay tenacious is what we're doing. We're going to stay the course. And now we come back the next game, maybe have better success in what we do. Hey, you showed tenacity. You fought through adversity, right? It's almost like, I feel like it's sometimes in sports, we get so emotionally attached to the scoreboard and we get so up and down. And as coaches, if we're going to have these acronyms, we got to live it out too, be an example of what we're trying to have our athletes be, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you also have to think in those kind of situations, especially with sports where there's winning and losing involved and achievement and failure, if you will, we're coaching and guiding young people, right? So, you know, I learned as a gymnast, I was a gymnast for almost 15 years, you know, I was constantly in that cycle of failure and achievement, and that just became part of who I am. But the result of that was that I was highly perfectionist, and it actually had a negative impact when I started to go beyond school, and the kind of the parameters of success were a lot more vague. You know, when you're in adulthood, parameters of success, you know, are just kind of what you make of them. But at school, there's very clear winning and losing. And so I think that we have to think about what is that effect? What is the effect that it's having on these young students and athletes, right? Like if we're losing a game, for example, yeah, of course, as the coach, we may be really upset. You know, we should have won that one. That was an easy one to win. Like they really didn't play very well. You know, they just missed the easiest shots, but they're probably feeling 1,000 times worse than you, right? And so creating that environment of, like you said, James, of that kind of conversation, how can we have that conversation in those moments so we can actually show firsthand what being tenacious means and what kind of getting back up really means, you know, in a physical sense, not just in a theoretical sense or an abstract sense.
Yeah, so what I hear you say is basically experience the acronym, right? It's kind of like, you know, because a lot of us are really good at coming up with these creative things, but then it's one thing to say them, it's another thing to show them, right? So it's important to show them. And so, and now we get to the phase, Caroline, where we go into our 4 questions with 40 athletes. So it's kind of like a 4 questions on like what you've learned in sports and how you've applied them in your life. So the first question is, what's the best life lesson that you've learned in sports?
I think I really learned because I was in gymnastics, I was in an individual sport, right? But I was also part of a team. And when I got to high school, I played a lot of sports in high school. Like I was the captain of hockey, like field hockey team, also of the track and field team. And so I went from being like a very solo athlete to now kind of being in this team environment. And when I think about that entire experience and almost that transition, I think about the fact that we need to work hard and show up and be unique and creative and skilled ourselves. But then we also have to think about how that uniqueness and that skill and that creativity of ours actually can become an asset for a team, right? Mm-hmm. And that, of course, applies to every part of our life, in our family, in our work, in our, sports, no matter what it is. And so I think that that's huge for me. It's like, who am I individually? And then how can I really harness those incredible skills that I have and that I'm proud of and that I'm confident with, so that we can then really use them and really really kind of contribute to the team that I'm in.
Yeah, it's almost like, you accept your role and you believe and you do the best with your role because it's good for the whole team, whatever your role may be. Right. So that's always something good to keep in mind for myself, especially as a coach, because sometimes you might think that I have to come up with all the answers or something like that. Like, well, maybe give your players a shot to see if they come up with something better than yourself. I don't.
I live and breathe that. Honestly, it's such an underrated strategy in sports, in the workforce. It's so underrated. Sometimes your teammates just have such because they're the ones experiencing it, right? Mm-hmm. In my work, with Cirque du Soleil, yes, I was the expert in what we were doing, but they were the ones actually scanning the tickets, pouring the drinks of the guests. They were escorting them to the big top. Same with sports. You may come up with the most amazing drill, but it's your athletes that are actually doing it. It's not you, right? So asking their experience, like, was that great? And they might have a very different answer to what you perceive was an incredible activity. So ask. I cannot say it enough.
That's great. Yeah. And I think I saw one time where, being a great question asker is one of the most undervalued skills. So I think that's one that I'm going to try to hone in better as being a better question asker. So the second one is this.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just heard a quote the other day, and it was quality questions equals quality life. And I wrote it on my wall. I never forgot that. It's such a good one, I think.
I'm going to add that to my quote book as well. Quality questions equal quality. Jimmy, remember that one. Okay. Okay. So hopefully we're getting some quality questions here for yourself. Actually, number 2 is, if you could spend time with anyone in sports that you admire, either alive or passed away, who would it be and why would you pick them?
So I think the number one person that I grew up just admiring, who was my hero, was Nadia Comaneci. And for anyone that doesn't know who she is, she's the first. Is a Romanian gymnast. She's the first gymnast to ever score a perfect 10, which in gymnastics was at the time thought impossible. So she's a legend. She's an absolute legend in the sport. Now she's in the States with her own gym. But I grew up. She actually had not a documentary, it was a movie about her. I watched it every single weekend on Saturdays when I got home from gymnastics. My parents and my sisters just hated it. I knew all the words without fail for years. Like, if there was a way to get a VHS tape and see how many times that you've actually watched that back, the number would be astronomical. But she was it for me. She was my biggest role model, and she was the most incredible person, because of what she did for the sport of gymnastics. And so I would love to have a conversation with her. I would love to interview her on the Experience Creators, but she's the first person that came to mind.
What was the documentary called, or the movie called? What was it called?
It's called Nadia. It's a super old school, it was probably made, I think it was actually, now that I think of it, it was released just before the 1992 Barcelona Olympics, I think, were 92.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but just before. So it was late 80s, early 90s VHS tape, but it was
classic,
called.
Yeah.
It was about her life. Yeah, it was from when she was young and when she got discovered, all the way up to when she went to the Olympics and had that incredible first perfect 10.
So she was big at the time when they had the dream team, the basketball dream team was coming.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
So question number 3 is, what is the best advice you received from a coach, mentor that you've, played under, worked with, been around?
Oof, that's very hard. I think the first thing that comes to mind is really that idea of believing in yourself, and it's such a cliche kind of thing to say, and it's on every t-shirt, I feel. But I think it's really important when you're young and you're playing sports, especially, and you're coming up and you're, a lot of times you're so unsure about yourself, especially when you're a teenager. Gosh, we all remember that, and there's so many insecurities there. And even if you're very great at something, there's always something that is going to tear that down. And a lot of times that's internal, right? And so I think, especially as a gymnast, I think that when I saw how much belief and faith my coach had in me, whether it was through words or just through actions, that had such an impact on me. And still to this day, like even now I'm thinking of like certain kind of moments where I remember one time I won this, it was at a club competition, and I won like the coach's award, and which is kind of like the teacher's pet. That's how everyone saw it. But I was very proud of it because it wasn't about my skill as a gymnast, because I was good, but I wasn't, elite or anything like that. But this award was really about kind of commitment and dedication and really showing up. And I was very proud of that award. Like I still remember it to this day, receiving it. I can still picture it. And so I think that's the biggest kind of lesson that I got is, now on the flip side as coaches, if you can really show your team how much you believe in them, and it doesn't have to be necessarily through words, you underestimate the impact that you're having on someone, and you may not find out until 20 years later, and they randomly message you and tell them how much they impacted you. So that would be my
last night. I had an 8th grader coach basketball, and this kid's gotten better. I mean, he just hasn't been coached a lot through the years of understanding how to play. So last night we're playing, and he ends up getting the ball. He made a couple good plays, and he did something, and somebody, player's like, go, don't take that or shoot that, whatever. He goes, I'm not a good basketball player. And I stopped, and I looked at him and said, don't ever say that again. Never. I said, you tell yourself you're a great basketball player, or you're going to be, or you believe. I said, drop down, do 10 push-ups. I said, don't ever say that again. And he dropped down and did them. And then I brought them all in. I said, like Jason, we talk about is like, can't, like drop the T and can't, I can, or not yet, but don't say I can't. The power of the word, the spoken word, right? So I reinforce, like, I don't want to hear that again. And I think as coaches, we can really help our athletes by helping them understand their inner voice, the dialogue they have, things they're saying to themselves. No, don't say that. Replace it with this. Even if it's not what you want, maybe not yet, but see it, continue to work toward what you want, and you'll get better as you do that.
Yeah, it's like teaching life skills, not tasks, right?
Yeah, very much.
And the thing is, why sports are so incredible early on is they just teach you so many incredible skills that you use for the rest of your life. And like you with this student, you have the ability to shape them and to really help mentor them in a way that is just, the impact is just going to be huge, and you just can't anticipate it. So it's pretty magical, like when you think about it from that point of view, I think.
Okay, last question I have for you. If you're coaching a team, your athletes are running your business, somebody working for you, what is one life skill, character trait that you'd want them to have? And you had one to choose, what would it be?
I think self-awareness, for sure, hands down. How can we communicate how we feel, and how can we understand how we feel, right? I was speaking recently, one of the lessons in my program is around triggers, understanding our own triggers. And I think that's a very complicated area, right? Because there's a lot of your own experience attached to it, and your own defaults and your own belief systems. But when we are able to have an awareness around how we show up and what triggers us and what motivates us and how we converse with people and how we express our feelings, I think you are just one step ahead of everyone else. And I think that even as adults, like I do a lot of coaching around that with my clients. It's not easy, and it's very deep. You have to do a lot of kind of deep learning. But as a coach, if you are able to, just like you did with that player, like show this level of understanding of, okay, saying that you're not a good basketball player, like what does that actually mean? Why are you saying that? Why is that your belief system? Something probably happened to make him feel that way, right? Or for the most part, for young people, some bully told him that he was a terrible basketball player and now he believes it. So I think for coaching, trying to influence and trying to teach self-awareness, whatever that means to you in your team, is huge, because then you're going to be able to communicate in a much different way. We've all had I can think of so many of my gymnasts who completely shut down. You reprimand them or you tell them that's not the right way to do it, or they're getting frustrated and they completely shut down because they don't have that ability to communicate how they feel. And for you as a coach, it's then very hard you're just guessing now, right? You're kind of just going, oh, I'm gonna go with this communication strategy as opposed to this one. And so if they are able to communicate at least a little bit, start that process of, this is how I feel, I acknowledge it, and now I'm going to voice it, because I know if I voice it, I am actually going to be able to make a positive change, because my coach will understand me better and we will be able to kind of talk it out, if you will. So that
but I like that when, like, for example, explaining to the individual about what you're saying and why that's maybe not beneficial for you, and maybe say different things. But as you said, be curious. Be curious. Okay, as a coach, you said ask questions. And I like the thing you said, ask the question, but quality questions give you quality answers, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm asking that student athlete, hey, like you said, what is it? Why? What does it happen that makes you think this way? What's going on, right? And it might be something me as a coach that I've done, right? 'Cause I know I've done things where, and sometimes we communicate in a way that we think we're communicating, and they hear it a certain way, but they heard it a different way.
Yeah.
So as you said, if I'm asking a question and finding out, they might say something I did.
Yeah.
I might have to now correct it, make them more aware of this, so we can move forward and understand, no, that's not what I was meaning by that.
Yeah, and even from a skill set point of view, right? Like this young student may think that he's a terrible basketball player because of something when he does like free throw shots, right? Like maybe that's his kind of reference point to why he's such a bad basketballer, because he never gets a free throw, So for you to have that understanding of that, now you spend 5 minutes with him at the free throw line and teach him, I don't know, like something different to how he's doing it. And now all of a sudden this confidence rushes in, but you never would have known that had you not had that conversation and had he not kind of brought it up. So to your point, like, get curious and ask questions, because I know in gymnastics, for example, the history is very authoritative, right? Like, it's very strict. And that's how I was coached. And for me, there was nothing wrong with that. And I think now, as we're becoming a lot more emotionally intelligent, we're realizing that it's not the best strategy, if you really want to get the best out of your athletes and your students and your employees. And so how can we just really encourage that self-awareness, that curiosity, that conversation exchange, so that we can get a little bit more deeper into what the issue is, because oftentimes it'll be a super quick fix maybe, or like you said, you may have said just one passing comment to this kid and he's held on to that forever, and you don't even remember saying it. So you just never know until you ask.
Caroline, thank you for coming on today and giving us so many different perspectives and such great knowledge nuggets today. Where can people find you, and how can they contact you?
Yeah, so my website is carolenemeli.com. It's just my full name, and that's also the same tag on Instagram as well. And then my interview series is on YouTube, and it's called The Experience Creators. So a couple different places, but I show up the same in all those places. So yeah, I'd love to connect with anyone.
Oh, great, Caroline.
Two things I'm going to think about you today. One is if I go eat at Outback Steakhouse, I'm going to be thinking about you right there, the Australians. My wife loves the Aussies. And the second thing is my sons. The other day I had practice outside. I couldn't go. It was like 70 degrees in Kansas City. And they went to the park by our house and they got on the monkey bars. And my one son's like, he's 8-year-old. He's like, Daddy, I went all the way forward and I went back all the way. I got to show you today. So when they get on the monkey bars, they had me thinking about you being these little gymnasts maybe running around.
Yeah. You know, the Outback, it's called the Outback, right?
Yeah, I think it's like an Americanized version. I don't really think that's very Australian.
There's one like Blooming Onions, I think.
Yeah, Blooming Onions. Yeah.
No Australian has ever eaten a blooming onion.
That's so, yeah. That's like saying, hey, you're going to a Mexican restaurant, I'm going to go to Taco Bell, I think. It's kind of like similar.
Yeah. Jason, how do you do that Aussie accent? What is that? What is your
Australian mate? Hey, I did that one time in college because we had a guy coming in from Australia, and I didn't think before I talked very much. And so like he introduced me, said, hey, my name's Sam. I was like, oh, good day, mate. And I was like, oh, that was probably the wrong first impression. But it worked out. We were friends afterwards. I was just like trying to make him feel welcome. But hey, there's this like Midwestern dude trying to have an Australian accent, and it needed some work, quite frankly. So
I'm sure many people have butchered your own accent. So
well,
it goes both ways.
Quite possibly, yeah. Caroline, thanks again for coming today, and we'll catch up with you real soon. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing. Bye.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And if you're looking to transform your athletes, teams, organizations by teaching them essential life skills through sports, like what Caroline mentioned, is what she emphasized. Join our course, 40athletes.com, where you can enroll, or you can also sign up and subscribe to our YouTube channel at 40athletes.com. There you'll be able to access all 24 weeks of our courses and get a better idea of how we're using essential life skills to improve athletes' lives and parents and coaches. Thank you again for joining, and we will see you all again next week on the 40 Athletes Live podcast.